You crossed the line!
No, please!
There will be no mercy! Engage!
Leon stopped screaming when he saw the blood on Mara's hands. Not because it was hers, because it was his teacher's, and the council guards were dragging children out of the classroom one by one. Beyond the glass, earth hung blue and silent, while Speaker Valor said, almost gently, "Take the young first." If stories like this stay under your skin, subscribe, like the video, and tell me where you're watching from before we begin. Because this one doesn't let go. Not after the first betrayal. Not after the last breath. Mara slammed both palms against the nursery barrier, hard enough to numb her wrists. "Leon!" Her son spun toward her. 9 years old, too thin in the shoulders, dark hair falling into frightened eyes. He was trying not to cry because she'd taught him that panic spreads faster than fire. Around him, 30 human children were being herded away from their lessons by council enforcers in silver armor. One little girl had lost a shoe. Another was holding a tablet like it was a shield. Teacher Seema lay crumpled on the floor behind them. She had stepped in front of the first child. The council had shot her in the throat for it. "You said they couldn't do this!" Leon shouted through the glass, his voice tinny through the emergency seal. "Mom, you said they made rules!" Mara opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because he was right. They had made rules. The council had built an empire on rules, codes, charters, oaths, civilized words wrapped around old violence. They had stripped Earth's fleets, taxed its colonies, rewritten its history books, and called it peace. But even after all that, there had still been one promise written into every treaty after the surrender at Ceres. No species would ever target the children of another. Not ever. Until today. A hard hand grabbed Mara's arm and yanked her back from the glass. "Don't make this worse," Consul Adrian Reese hissed. He was human. Gray suit, council pin on his collar. The man who had spent 10 years smiling in front of cameras and teaching humanity how to bow without looking broken. "Worse?" Mara jerked free. "They just murdered a teacher!" Reese's face twitched, but only for a second. "There was an attack on the outer ring. Speaker Valor believes human extremists are responsible. This is temporary containment." Inside the classroom, Leon was being pulled away. He wasn't crying anymore. That terrified her more. "Containment," she said. "Those are children." Reese lowered his voice. "Then don't force them to make an example." That was the moment she understood. He already knew. Mara turned and saw the chamber doors opening at the far end of the corridor. Speaker Valor entered with the patience of a priest and the coldness of a butcher. Tall, pale, draped in black ceremonial silk, he walked past the blood on the floor without even glancing down. Around him floated holoscreens showing fire on the station's freight ring, smoke pouring through docking bays, and the words, "Security breach, human cell suspected." The timing was too perfect, the fear too immediate, the seizure too prepared. This hadn't happened after the attack, it had happened with it. Valor stopped in front of Mara. For a moment, all the corridor noise seemed to fall away. "I know who you are," he said softly. "Mara Vance, liaison class translator, widow of Noah Vance." Her stomach dropped. Nobody used Noah's name unless they wanted something. "You have no right to touch our children." Valor looked past her, through the glass, to Leon. The smallest smile touched his mouth. "Rights," he said, Survive only as long as order does. Then he walked on. The emergency shutters slammed down over the classroom, and her son disappeared behind steel. 17 years earlier, Mara had watched her mother burn alive in the skies over Ceres when the Council ended the war in one afternoon. Human cruisers shattered, escape pods erased, broadcasts jammed with one clean sentence in 6 languages. Submit, or your species becomes a lesson. Humanity submitted, not because it was weak, because it was exhausted. Because there were too many graves already. Because some people, like Mara, believed that if they swallowed enough pride, enough rage, enough memory, their children might one day grow up without knowing what a pressure breach sounded like. That belief had cost her almost everything. Her husband Noah had died in a reactor accident 8 years after the surrender. At least, that was the official story. Brilliant systems engineer. Quiet man, always looking over his shoulder. He had once told her, late at night while Leon slept between them during a storm over Luna, "Peace built on fear isn't peace. It's a pause." She had told him to stop talking like that. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Now, standing in that blood-slick corridor, Mara heard his voice like a warning arriving years too late. A pulse vibrated against her wrist. She looked down. Leon's old beacon bracelet. A child locator, cheap and half-broken, the kind parents still used in crowded ports, even though the Council claimed the stations were safer than temples. Its screen flashed once, then showed a location. Sublevel transit. Leon had dropped it when they dragged him away. He was telling her where they were taking them. Mara ran. She didn't remember deciding to move. One second she was standing there. The next, she was shoving through diplomats, ducking under security tape, taking a maintenance stairwell 2 flights at a time. Her lungs burned. Her shoes slipped on metal grates. Somewhere above, the station sirens kept repeating the same lie in 6 calm voices. Please remain in your designated zones. The Council is preserving public safety. At the sublevel transit platform, she found 32 sets of restraints hanging from a cargo rail. And 47. And 60. Not just Leon's classroom. All of them. A freight tram sat waiting with its doors open. No children inside. Just a dropped, stuffed rabbit, one cracked inhaler, and a smear of blood at knee height by the seat. Mara bent to pick up the rabbit with shaking fingers. "Mom?" The voice came from her left. For one impossible second, hope exploded so hard in her chest it hurt. But it wasn't Leon. It was Nadi, a 6-year-old from Habitat 12, curled under the tram bench with her face pressed into her sleeves. Her hair had been hacked unevenly where someone had grabbed her. Mara dropped to her knees. Hey, sweetheart. Where's Leon?" Nadi stared at her with eyes too wide for her face. "They took the older ones to the black ship. The ones who could read the lights." Mara frowned. "What lights?" Nadi swallowed. "The math lights. The puzzle walls. They said some of us can hear patterns the Council can't." A boot step echoed behind Mara. She turned fast enough to nearly fall. Her brother Gideon stood at the platform entrance with 2 illegal pulse pistols under his coat and the expression of a man who had just run out of reasons to be patient. "You were right," Mara said. He gave one bitter laugh. "I hate when that happens." They hadn't spoken in 11 months. Not since he'd accused her of laundering Council propaganda with nicer words. Not since she'd called him an addict for smuggling weapons to colonies that didn't want to kneel. He crossed the platform, took one look at the restraints, and his jaw tightened. "This is happening everywhere," he said. "Moon schools, Martian shelters, colony transports. Same hour, same order. They're sweeping every human child registered in central systems." "Why?" Gideon looked at Nadi under the bench, then back at Mara. "Because they finally found what Noah died hiding." The world seemed to tilt. "What did you say?" He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the service corridor. "Move first, fall apart later." They got Nadi onto Gideon's smuggler shuttle through a maintenance airlock half an hour before the station entered full lockdown. The little ship was ugly, patched, and smelled like engine solvent and bad coffee. But it launched clean into the dark side of the ring without getting tagged. Inside, Mara strapped Nadi into a crash seat and turned on the cabin heaters. Only then did Gideon hand her a chipped data wafer. "I pulled it from a dead courier 3 months ago," he said. "Didn't know if it was real." The file opened to Noah's face, recorded in secret. Exhausted, unshaven, looking older than the man she had buried. "If this reaches Mara, it means the Council crossed the line I prayed they wouldn't. Listen carefully. The surrender didn't end the first war. It buried the last weapon from it." Mara stopped breathing. Noah continued. "Before Ceres fell, human engineers discovered something under the Kuiper relays. Not a bomb, not a fleet exactly. An ancient defense lattice older than the Council itself. It doesn't answer to rank, genetics, or language. It answers to one thing: bonded cognition. Human families. Shared patterning. The way we teach, grieve, and remember together. Children interface best. That's why the Council will come for them if they ever learn the truth." The recording crackled. "If they take the children, it won't be for hostages. It'll be to strip the species of the one thing they can't control. If that day comes, there is a fallback, hidden in the song I sing Leon every night. Not the melody, the last verse. Don't let them hear it unless you're ready for what follows. Because if the last line is crossed, humanity won't get another warning." The screen went black. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Nadi whispered from the seat behind them, "They kept making the kids solve wall patterns. Leon was better than all of us." Mara closed her eyes. Of course he was. Leon had always seen things sideways. Secret rhythms. Number chains in rainfall. Symmetry in broken glass. Noah used to call it hearing the hidden gears. "What's the black ship?" Mara asked. Gideon brought up a tactical display. A massive Council command carrier sat beyond the ring's shadow, dark as a bruise, shielded and silent. Its name flashed across the panel. Judicator. "All child transfers end there," Gideon said. "Then they move them planet-side to the Council Citadel by morning. If that happens, we won't touch them again." Mara stood so fast her chair slammed backward. "Then we board it." He stared at her. "That ship can vaporize cities." "They have my son." "They have everyone's son." That hit harder than a slap because it was true. Across Luna, Mars, and the inner belts, mothers were searching empty schools. Fathers were pounding on sealed gates. Families were learning, all at once, that the line they had trusted was just paint on the floor. Mara looked at the rabbit still clutched in her hand. A stupid soft toy. One ear half burned. Proof that a child had believed this morning would end like every other. "Noah said there was a fallback," she said. "Tell me." Gideon's face went flat. It's called the Morning Fleet. The name sounded like a prayer spoken at gunpoint. It's not a fleet humans built, he said. It's what the old lattice becomes when it's awakened through the last verse. Autonomous strike systems buried in dead space. Faster than Council jump logic. Unhackable. Unstoppable. Noah and a handful of others buried the trigger because once it wakes, it doesn't negotiate. Who does it target? The chain of command responsible for species-level child persecution. Mara stared at him. Gideon held her gaze. Mara, if Valor completes the integration decree, if he rewires those kids or learns the song from them, this ends with humanity domesticated or erased. There is no appeal, no summit, no after. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say there had to be another way. Then the cabin speakers crackled, hijacked by a live council broadcast. Speaker Valor filled the screen. Behind him stood rows of human children in pale transit uniforms. Numbered, not named. Mara's hands began to shake. Leon was in the second row. A bruise darkened one side of his face. His wrists were bound. But he was standing close to two smaller children, shielding them with his shoulders in the way Noah used to stand in crowds. Casual, protective, instinctive. Valor began. Today, in response to coordinated human terrorism, the Council invokes provisional custodial authority over all human minors within governed space. Gasps rose from off-screen journalists. Valor continued like he was discussing weather. These children will be rehabilitated from inherited aggression and raised under disciplined guidance. Compliance by their families will reduce necessary force. Then a teenage boy in the back spat at an enforcer's boots. The enforcer shot him in the chest so quickly the body was still falling when the feed cut to static. Noddy screamed. Mara didn't. She just sat down very carefully because her legs no longer seemed attached to her. That was live, Gideon said quietly. They wanted every human world to see. A new feed pushed through on the lower corner. Habitat 12, outer airlock cameras. Parents gathered outside a sealed child wing. Some were pounding on the doors. Some were on their knees. Then the atmosphere vented. The crowd vanished into white crystal and silence. Noddy made a sound Mara would hear in her sleep until she died. That was the moment something inside her stopped asking for permission. 3 hours later, the human sectors were burning. Not from council bombardment, from uprisings. Dock workers, medics, cargo pilots, janitors, men too old for war and women who had buried it years earlier. People who had swallowed every insult because their children were more important than pride. Now those children were gone, and pride came back with teeth. Mara should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt time shrinking around Leon. Gideon's crew gathered in the shuttle bay with stolen council uniforms and a boarding plan that looked suicidal. There was Imani, a former Marine with a metal hand and a scar running into her hairline. Jax, a nervous systems tech who talked too fast when terrified. Old Tomas, who had once serviced council sanitation ducts and knew the Judicator's lower decks better than its captain probably did. Say it now if you want out, Gideon told them. Nobody moved. Imani checked the charge on her rifle. They shot a boy on a broadcast. Jax swallowed. My sister's twins were in Sector Nursery 4. Tomas only said, "Open the doors." As they suited up, Mara found a private corner near the cargo hatch and listened to Noah's recording again. Not the message, the lullaby after it. soft, imperfect. Leon's sleepy little laugh in the background. Noah forgetting a word and making one up. A normal memory. That was the cruelest part. Some of the most dangerous things in history begin as something tender. They boarded the Judicator through a waste processing conduit lined with condensation and metal rot. Glamorous was not the word Mara would have used, even before the first security drone almost saw them and Imani crushed it against a pipe with her prosthetic hand. Inside the ship, everything was too clean. Hallways wide enough to feel holy. No windows, no sound except the hum of engines and the distant steady rhythm of ordered cruelty. At the first holding block, they found 12 children. Drugged, silent, number tabs stuck to their collars. Mara started unlocking restraints while Jax sliced the door panel. "Leon?" she whispered to each face, even when she knew it wasn't him. One boy finally gripped her sleeve. "The smart ones are above," he said. "They took them to the chamber with the stars on the floor." Mara's pulse kicked hard. They moved. On Deck 9, they found the stars on the floor. A circular observation hall, dark glass dome, holographic constellations underfoot. 50 children seated at neural stations while council analysts watched brainwave feeds climbing across the air like ghost ladders. At the center sat Leon. A copper crown of interface wire pressed into his temples. His lips were moving, singing Noah's lullaby. Not the last verse, the one before it. "Stop!" Mara screamed. Every head turned. For one perfect second, mother and son just stared at each other across the hall. Then all hell broke loose. Imani opened fire first. Jax killed the lights. Gideon vaulted a console and drove a blade into the nearest analyst. Children screamed. Glass cracked. Alarms erupted. Mara ran straight through it all, ripping the crown from Leon's head hard enough to tear skin. He gasped and clung to her so fiercely she nearly fell. "Mom, I've got you. They made me do the song. I know. There's another girl. I know." Because of course there was. Leon pointed to a station in the corner where Nadi's older sister, Rhea, sat convulsing under a neural surge. Mara cursed, shoved Leon into Gideon's arms, and crossed through flying sparks to pull Rhea free. The extra 10 seconds cost them everything. Security shutters slammed over the exits, and Adrian Rice walked in with council guards at his back. He looked almost sad. That was the revolting part. "As predictable as grief," he said. Gideon raised his pistol. Rice nodded once. A sniper round punched through Gideon's side and sent him crashing to the floor. Mara screamed his name. Leon lunged toward his uncle, but Mara caught him, dragging both children behind a toppled console as pulse fire tore through the chamber. Rice stepped closer, calm in the chaos. "You still don't understand," he said to Mara. "The Council was never going to let humanity remain unruly. I negotiated the gentlest outcome available." "You sold children." "I preserved the species." Gideon coughed blood and laughed at the same time. "You spineless." Rice shot him again. Leon flinched so hard Mara felt it through both their bodies. Something old and feral rose in her throat. Rice crouched just beyond the cover. "Speaker Valor is willing to spare your son from full cognitive correction if you give him the final verse. Noah trusted you. He shouldn't have. Mara's fingers found Gideon's blood on the floor. Warm. Real. Her brother, who had spent half his life angry because anger was easier than helplessness, was dying 10 feet away because she had believed rules could protect her. "You want Noah's last verse?" she said, voice shaking. Rice nodded. Mara looked at Leon. His face was wet. He was trying to be quiet about it. That broke her more than anything. "Dad said the last verse isn't just words," Leon whispered. "It's a choice." Rice's expression sharpened. "What does that mean?" Gideon dragged himself forward, leaving a smear behind him. With blood bubbling at his mouth, he shoved a data drive across the floor toward Mara. "Proof," he rasped. "Valor staged the freight attack. Whole thing. Planned months ago. Custody lists, execution quotas. Broadcast it." Mara grabbed the drive. Reese realized too late what was happening. Jax, half dead by the wall, slammed his palm onto a maintenance override. The emergency shutters twitched open 4 inches. Imani roared, lifted the metal panel with her prosthetic hand as pulse rounds burned into her armor, and bellowed, "Move!" Mara pulled Leon. Leon grabbed Rhea. They slid through the gap while Gideon remained on the other side. For one frozen heartbeat, brother and sister looked at each other through the narrowing space. "I'm sorry," Mara said. Gideon smiled with blood on his teeth. "No, make them sorry." The shutters sealed. The explosion behind them bent the corridor. Leon screamed for him. Mara didn't turn around. Because if she had, she would never have kept moving. They reached the transmission spine with 3 children, 1 wounded Marine, and a drive full of proof the Council had manufactured the entire crisis. Jax was gone. Tomas was gone. Gideon was gone. Imani jammed the drive into the uplink port. Reese's face flashed across internal security channels, already issuing lies. "Can you push all frequencies?" Mara asked. Imani's metal fingers flew over the console. "For about 15 seconds before they cut power." "Do it." The files erupted across every human screen in governed space. Signed decrees, seizure schedules, nursery maps, psychological studies on human familial vulnerability. Valor's own authorization of the freight ring bombing. Reese's private agreement accepting governorship over Luna in exchange for full child census access. Humanity didn't need another speech. It needed to see the mask come off. On every open channel, the Council's morality died in public. And then Valor made his final mistake. A new broadcast overrode the leak. The main chamber. 300 human children kneeling in a crescent before the Council dais. Leon among them no longer, but enough faces to paralyze a species. Valor stood above them. "Since human insurgents have chosen violence," he said, "the Council will now demonstrate consequence." Enforcers raised rifles. The chamber clock began to count down from 60. Mara felt Leon clutch the back of her suit. "What do we do?" he whispered. There it was. The question every human parent had really been asking since Ceres. How much of your soul do you keep when the only way to save your child is to let something monstrous wear your face? Mara closed her eyes. She heard Noah singing in the storm dark on Luna. He was off key. Leon was half asleep. The heater was broken, and they had 3 unpaid bills on the table. And it had been one of the happiest nights of her life. The last verse came back to her whole, not as a weapon, as a vow. If they come for the young, let grief become judgment. Let memory choose the target. Let love decide what mercy no longer can. Mara opened her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered to whatever version of herself had once believed diplomacy alone could save the world. Then she sang. Not loudly, not theatrically, just enough for the ship to hear. Just enough for the old lattice hidden beyond the mapped dark to recognize the shape of a human promise finally broken. The lights died. Every system aboard the Judicator froze. For one impossibly silent second, the universe seemed to inhale. Then space outside the dome windows tore open with lines of white fire. Ships emerged that did not jump like ships. They unfolded. Ancient black geometry layered over starlight, larger than dreadnoughts, moving with the cold certainty of math that had waited too long. Across every channel in Council space, alarms started screaming. Morning Fleet active. Chain of command targeting confirmed. No surrender arbitration available. The first Council flagship vanished so completely it left a clean hole in the stars. Then the second. Then the command relays over Mars. Then the Citadel escort ring. No speeches, no bargaining, no mercy. Only judgment. Inside the Judicator, enforcers dropped rifles and ran. Some tore off their insignia like frightened children. Others begged the species they had just tried to break. Rise appeared again on a side corridor feed, blood on his collar, pounding at a sealed escape pod where Valor had locked him out. "Speaker! Speaker, I served you! Open this!" Valor's face appeared through the pod glass for half a second. Calm. Empty. Then the pod launched without him. Rise turned just in time to see human dock workers flooding the corridor behind him. His screams cut out when the feed died. Mara took Leon's hand and walked toward the main chamber. Imani limped beside her, bleeding through the side. "Once we open that door," the Marine said, "there's no going back." Mara looked straight ahead. They already took care of that. The chamber smelled like panic. Council elders who had spent decades sentencing worlds now crouched behind overturned benches while the children they had numbered stared at them in silence. Enforcers lay disarmed, some dead, some crying. The rifles had never fired. The fleet activation had killed the chamber grid before the execution order completed. Valor stood alone at the center dais. He had lost the room, and somehow not his posture. Around them, deep in the ship's bones, metal groaned as the morning fleet methodically dismantled the Judicator's command spine. Mara stepped forward with Leon beside her. Valor's eyes settled on the boy first. "Remarkable," he said. "Even now, you keep him near the danger." Mara laughed once. It sounded terrible. "You murdered teachers and froze parents at airlocks." "And you woke extinction." "No," she said. "You did." For the first time, something real flickered in his face. Not remorse. Fear. "It won't stop with us," he said. "The Council binds 1,000 species. When order collapses, they will tear each other apart." Mara thought of the treaties, the censuses, the schools, the blood on the nursery floor. "You confused control with order," she said. Valor took one step backward toward the emergency dais controls. Leon squeezed her hand. "Mom." She saw it then. A Deadman command pad. If Valor reached it, he could vent the chamber before the ship fell. Mara moved at the same moment he did. Imani fired once. The shot hit Valor in the shoulder, spinning him sideways, but not before his hand slapped the control. Emergency airlock sequence initiated.
The chamber doors sealed. Pressure warnings screamed. Children started crying. Valor sagged against the dais, one hand over his wound, and still managed to smile. "Then we die together." Mara looked up. A narrow panel in the ceiling had begun to split open towards space. She should have run for cover. She should have tried to override the seal. Instead, she shoved Leon toward the nearest cluster of children and climbed the dais. Valor's eyes widened a fraction. Maybe he expected a plea. Maybe he expected a civilized ending. He had earned neither. Mara drove him backward, both of them slamming into the opening emergency hatch as the first pull of vacuum clawed at loose papers and blood and breath. "You took the young first," she said into his face. Valor tried to answer, but decompression stole the words. She saw, in that final instant, that he did understand. Not humanity, not love, just consequence. Mara hit the manual release. The outer shield irised open, and Speaker Valor vanished into the black. Imani got the chamber seals back 3 seconds before everyone died. 3 seconds. That was all history needed to turn. By dawn, the Council no longer existed as a command structure. Its fleets were blind. Its ministries were shattered.
Its collaborators were dragged into light by the very records they had hidden. Humanity did not conquer the stars that day. It did something colder. It made itself impossible to shepherd ever again. The costs came later. Bodies identified in melted corridors. Names read from school ledgers. Mothers who got one child back and not another. Fathers who stood in rescue bays, searching every face until hope became cruelty. Mara buried Gideon on Luna, under a sky he used to mock for being too artificial. Nadi buried Ria's number tag because there was no body to bury. Imani survived, barely, and never again stepped onto a council-built deck. Leon stopped singing for almost a year. One night, long after the fires were out, he asked Mara the question she had been avoiding since the day he survived. "Did we win?" She sat with him in the dark of their small apartment, listening to the old heater rattle like it had on the night Noah sang them to sleep. Outside, Earth turned below the station windows, quiet and impossibly blue. Mara thought of rules, graves, empty classrooms, ancient ships awakening to a mother's voice. Then she pulled Leon close and answered with the only truth she had left. "No," she said softly, "but they lost." And sometimes that is the line history remembers. Not the treaty, not the speech, not the empire. Just the moment someone touched what should never have been touched, and learned too late that mercy was the only thing holding humanity back. Tell me in the comments, if someone crossed that line with the people you loved, would you still choose mercy?